Hi everyone. I'm actually early because last time I was 1 minute late and it didn't let me do anything. So I'm gonna do all the boring checks as usual. And I only really care that we're live in the right places. What is it gonna make it so it's exactly? Oh no, okay. Well I have an email telling me I'm live. But can't see anything there. Or maybe it's because I'm logged in. Oh, no, wait, I am live. Okay, right. As usual, sorry for that boring start. Okay, hi everyone. Hope you've had amazing days. It's Monday. I'm amped up. I'm excited. I have great things to debunk for you, but I also have a really great story. So I'm going to tell you about this really cool case study. As you can tell, I'm a massive geek and get excited about case studies, but this is really interesting. So it's a couple of years old actually, but it just came back to my attention because one of my amazing clients sent me it and I was like, oh, yes, this is such a good example of aging in the right way. So it's a case study of this man who's 93 years old. He's called Richard. And he has the aerobic fitness and percentage body fat of a healthy 30 to 40-year-old. And he's the indoor rowing world champion. And he started exercising. This is the most important part. He only started exercising when he was 73. Until that, he just never trained seriously in his life. And this, I think it's in the Journal of Applied Physiology if you want to go and look it up. But they found that he weighs about 165 pounds. He's about 80% muscle and 15% body fat. His heart rate during maximal tests was 153 beats per minute, which is one of the highest ever recorded for someone of his age. His oxygen uptake kinetics, which is like a marker of fitness, was equivalent to someone who was like 30 to 40 years old. And this is another interesting part, is that his training was very simple. It was quite a lot of rowing every day, about 40 minutes of rowing a day, most of it quite easy with some like short, sharp, intense bouts. And then he did some dumbbell workouts. So nothing particularly fancy or overly exciting or new or different. It's just doing the basics consistently. And what else do I have to tell you about this? It does bring up some quite interesting questions about what aging actually looks like and how much we just take as like, oh, well, that's what happens as you age. Like most of us are told that we will gain weight, lose muscle, decline in health as we age. And you almost just like accept that to be the case. This is one of the big drivers that is behind my whole ethos of like, fuck average. It's not really about being like, fuck average, I'm better than everybody else. It's actually nothing to do with that. It's really like, fuck those average stats of people that end up feeling like everything is going downhill as they age, feeling like they have to put on body fat, like that they're definitely going to lose muscle mass, that their fitness is going to go down, that everything kind of gets worse. And it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. And like, this is a great example of someone who started exercise at 72 years old. You know, I have 35-year-olds coming to me and they're like, oh, I wonder if it's too late. I'm like, you're 35 years old. Like, what is like, it's definitely not too late to start, especially not if someone's starting at 72. And then that kind of begs the question, how much of physical decline that we see is biological aging versus how much is actually just inactivity and decades of not really challenging our muscles or our heart or our lungs, our cardiovascular system. Because if someone can start at 72 and see these huge increases in fitness and health and be able to build muscle, then it kind of begs the question, you know, like what could other people be doing, especially if they're starting earlier? Yeah, so I just think we should question the narrative of talking about aging as if it's something that just happens to us. And what I'm certainly not saying is exercise stops aging. which I've seen a few headlines of, and I'm like, no, look, it's not quite true, right? This person, this rower, Richard, will certainly be slower now than he was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But the decline, the gradient of the decline, i.e., how fast your health is declining or your fitness is declining, is much slower when you're staying active. And he's living proof that being consistently active and exercising slows aging, right? You're not going to stop aging, but you can certainly slow aging, and you can change the way that those years are spent. So it's never too late to change that trajectory. And yeah, and that's kind of the whole ethos behind saying like fuck average to these metrics of aging that you see in the research that happens to most people. Well, if you're not behaving like most people, which is people who tend to be less active as they age, eat poor diets, don't exercise consistently, then actually those general statistics don't apply to you. And if you want to be a fuck average legend, then make sure you sign up to this intake of Commit 6. I have named this intake the Fuck Average Club because average people don't start in December, only legends do. Most people will wait until January, and they end up ending the year feeling quite crap and starting the new year with low energy, low mood, and usually quite low motivation. Most people kind of think it's going to be easier to start in January. It's almost always not. In fact, it's usually significantly harder to start in January. It's much easier to start the year already feeling great and having enjoyed Christmas, but not overdone it. So especially on this Commit 6, you're not only going to get our world-class coaching, but you're also going to get access to the 6-week mindset course that I wrote to help people get out of their own way, stop holding themselves back, and take action towards the life that they actually want to live. Plus my Energy First formula, which I have to say is wildly effective and is exactly how I train now, which is focused primarily on building as much energy as possible and training in a way that optimizes energy and living in a way that optimizes energy, because then honestly everything is so much easier. Like getting a lot of work done is so much easier. Being resilient to stress is much easier. Losing fat is a hell of a lot easier. Not overeating is easier. Exercising is easier. Think about the times when you found those things the most easy. They're always the times when you've had the most energy. And what most people do is they come in already lacking energy, and then they try and amp on all of these different things that they have to do when they're already really fatigued. So we need to flip that on its head, build your energy first, and actually the rest is a hell of a lot easier once you do that. So if you are interested, head over to esgfitness.co.uk/commit. We still have early bird spaces available. They went out this morning. And now I'm going to get onto some debunking. So I was sent 2 reels this week by people who were confused by the messaging in them. And the reason I've like pulled these together is they kind of follow the same trend, but with very different examples. And actually that trend is something I've noticed more and more, which is explaining normal human physiology, but in a scientific way. So you sound quite smart, but then you claim that your program does it, right? So the first one was this woman who was saying that based on her years of experience of working with people, she finds that women that come to her, their bodies don't know how to utilize carbohydrates. But by buying her plan, she can teach you how to train in a way that's going to make your body more efficient at using carbs or more able to use carbs. And this is a classic case of selling you a problem that you don't actually have, or like telling you that you have this problem and then selling you a solution, but you didn't actually have the problem in the first place. So to quote what she said, here's your exact prescription for how to use carbs to build muscle, improve recovery, and increase exercise tolerance. And then she goes on to basically simply explain normal human physiology and then claims that her training is what does that. And some of the claims are just like wild and would never happen. Like if you understand basic physiology, and like for me reading this, I was like going back to what I did at uni 10 years ago, like basic exercise physiology, you understand that this is definitely not what's happening. So one of the claims was you can't recover or build muscle without a strong aerobic base. Now, nothing wrong with a strong aerobic base, would 100% recommend, but you absolutely can recover and build muscle without a strong aerobic base. Like hypertrophy and strength gains occur with zero cardio, and recovery from lifting is driven by your training, your rest, your sleep, your protein, your total calories. Having an aerobic base might technically build your work capacity, but it's certainly not a prerequisite to recovering from like muscle growth. You don't need it to build muscle, for example. The second claim was that, where are we? Living in an anaerobic state stops you clearing lactate, so you get puffy, inflamed, and tired. Now, lactate is a byproduct of anaerobic metabolism. It's not like this toxin that's going to make you puffy, inflamed, and tired. It's actually a useful fuel that can be metabolized to then break down and produce energy. And the body will clear lactate by doing this via oxidation when it has oxygen available within the mitochondria of the cell, right? So you don't need structured cardio to be doing that. It certainly won't make you puffy and inflamed if you weren't clearing it. But actually, if you weren't clearing it, you'd have significant other problems, which in a weird way, she kind of alludes to in the next claim. But like as just to cover that part, like lactate buildup during exercise isn't a bad thing, and you will clear it afterwards. But actually, it's also part of what stops you exercising at an intensity that you can't maintain. Because if you start to exercise in an anaerobic capacity at a level that you couldn't clear lactate, what happens is that lactate starts to accumulate. Anyone who's ever done any kind of sprint training will have felt what this feels like, and it's kind of like a burning sensation in your muscles. Like it's part of what stops you exercising to protect your body, because you can't maintain exercise at that level. And then the next claim is that anaerobic metabolism causes acidity, and you can't buffer it without a strong aerobic base. And this, again, is like, there's a little bit of just like misunderstood science in there. So yes, lactate is acidic, but you will buffer that yourself, and your body certainly won't let itself get into an acidic state. So your body isn't suddenly going to become acidic because you're doing anaerobic metabolism, or because you don't have a strong aerobic base. You would be in serious trouble if your body wasn't keeping to quite a tight pH balance. And then the next claim is that cardio is required to recover from lifting. And that, again, is not true. Sure, some like light activity might speed up recovery and blood flow, but you certainly don't need to do cardio. And you could almost argue this the other way, that excessive amounts of cardio actually have opposing adaptations to resistance training. So if you don't program particularly well and you're doing very hard cardio type work and hard resistance type work, actually some of the adaptations will counteract each other, and you might not get as good result in either. Now, you can absolutely program this well so that you can do both very well, but you definitely don't need cardio to recover from lifting. And then the next thing that she talks about is shifting carbs to the morning and around workouts for quote unquote metabolic flexibility. And this isn't bad advice at all. You absolutely could do this, but it's definitely total calories and within that, like macronutrients that are going to matter way more than the timing. Having pre and post workout carbohydrates is much more important if you're someone who's training numerous times a day, or like you're an elite athlete who needs to recover very quickly. For most people who are like, yeah, I do 3 workouts a week, like you really don't need to be worrying about the timing of your pre and post workout carbs. And then the final claim that she makes is cardio depletes and repletes glycogen, teaching your body to store carbohydrates better. Again, both resistance training and cardio will deplete glycogen and improve insulin sensitivity, and thus allow you to utilize carbohydrates better. So it's not something that's specific to cardio. It's not something that's specific to this person's specific cardio boosting plan. And then metabolic flexibility has been thrown around quite a lot within this as well. There's a claim here that metabolic flexibility is about eating more carbs calmly once you build an aerobic base. And that's not really true. I would say it's your ability to switch between using carbohydrates for fuel versus fats for fuel, which your body is actually very efficient at doing anyway, especially if you're someone who resistance trains frequently, who is active, who is a healthy weight, who is sleeping well, who's getting enough protein in, and who's getting enough fiber in. Like, those are going to have so much more impact than the timing of your carbohydrate intake. So if you're worrying about this kind of minutia of a very specific cardio base building program and the meal timings behind that, but you're not already resistance training, getting in, 10,000 steps or so, sleeping enough, getting in enough protein, and maintaining a healthy body weight, like, those are the things you should be focusing on first. And then magically, when you do that, actually your body is very efficient at then being able to utilize carbohydrates and being metabolically flexible. But those are the things I'd be focusing on. I wouldn't be focusing on the metabolic flexibility. That's a byproduct of being lean, fit, and healthy. So to conclude, to be clear, your body will clear lactate on its own, and you can build muscle without having a cardio base. You can recover without cardio. Lifting weights will also deplete glycogen and increase insulin sensitivity and metabolic flexibility. So you don't need to worry about having this very specific cardio builder. That's not the key magic thing that you're missing. Now, saying that, do I think adding in cardio to your workouts is a good thing? Yeah, why not? Like, why wouldn't you want to be fit and healthy? But this is just a really good example of using normal human physiology, using quite big kind of scary words and telling you that you've got this acidic buildup and that's what's going on for you, to overcomplicate something, tell you have a problem that you don't have, and then sell you a fix. Because actually, if you focus on getting lean, fit, and healthy, none of those things would be an issue anyway. Another example of this is a reel I was sent of a woman who was eating some cake, and the text over it is, women think that they need to build muscle before they can eat like this until they realize ... And then she goes through this quite compelling story of someone who came to her who was eating less than 1,600 calories, tracking all her macros, training 4 times a week, and finding that nothing was changing. And then she started thinking, 1,600 calories must be my maintenance. Maybe I need to build more muscle so that I can eat more. Or if I try to eat more than this, I'll just gain fat. Now, I'm sure that loads of people can relate to this, which is what makes it such a good hook. And because of this, a lot of people will try and sell you something off the back of it. So basically they're saying, hey, people that are trying really hard and it's not working for you, I have this solution for you. When in reality, like, whenever you have someone who's, on calories that should be a deficit for them and seems to be ticking all the boxes and doing all the right things, the likelihood is adherence is the problem. It's not something shiny and new that they need. It's not like a magic quick fix. It's looking at why they're not adherent to that, and maybe those calories are slightly too low, but it's not this magic outcome, which for her, or this magic theory, which for her is meal timing. Apparently that's the magic here, is the meal timing that's changed. So long story short, she goes through the fact that she changed meal timing for this person. Now the person's eating 2,000 calories and 270 grams of carbs while also losing weight, and has already lost almost 5 pounds. And this is just the prep phase, not even the fat loss phase, right? And this quote just summarizes it so well. She says, you don't need more generic beginner advice. You need a high-level body transformation strategy. Again, prime example of, you have this problem and I'm going to fix it for you, when actually you didn't have that problem in the first place. Now, what she goes through, like, there are probably some truths to it. So this person was like, yeah, I was eating 1,600 calories, training, and like nothing was changing. The likelihood is she wasn't actually averaging 1,600 calories. We see this all the time. A lot of the time, people will try and stick to calories that might be too low to them and then actually end up overeating, or they think they're sticking to lower calories, but then they're not tracking certain condiments, or they're not tracking liquid calories, or they only track during the week and they're like, yeah, the weekend should be fine. And then they don't track. And anyway, basically, if you were sticking to what should be a deficit, then you would be losing fat. So there's a reason that you're not sticking to that. It might be an adherence problem, it might be a tracking problem, it might be a little bit of both. What the issue wasn't was the meal timing, apart from the fact that it could be behavioral, right? So this person said that actually the solution is meal timing. Now, this is where it starts to sound like marketing bullshit. Is meal timing like completely irrelevant? No, but it's certainly not the secret to why someone isn't losing fat despite technically being in a deficit, right? What it can help with is things like hunger control, like getting into a good routine, fueling themselves well, not letting themselves get too hungry so that they end up overeating. But this is much more to do with behavior. So often when you look at meal timings and, for example, and this is what this person has done, is like put more food at the start of the day, often people then end up eating less towards the end of the day, and they're less likely to then overeat in the evening, which is when most people will overeat. So it could be that you shift meal timing, and then you're going to reduce the likelihood of like binging in the evening, and you get into a slightly better routine, and actually you adhere better to your calorie target, and that's why you lose weight, right? There's no secret. It's behavioral. It's not like some secret thing that's overcome energy balance. It wasn't that this person was sticking to 1,600 calories and just eating at the wrong times of day. It's that they weren't sticking to 1,600 calories. That's the issue. What I will say is that there is some evidence that eating your calories earlier in the day is actually better in terms of glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. This is something I only really advocate for with women with PCOS or with pre-diabetics or diabetics, unless it just suits someone's life. But for most people, it's not that big a deal. And also, depending on when you're exercising, that will also change, like, quote unquote, peak insulin sensitivity as well, because you will have this slight circadian rhythm to insulin sensitivity, where it does technically peak at around 12, and you have slightly higher insulin sensitivity in the morning than you do in the evening. But what has a much bigger impact on insulin sensitivity is your movement and your exercise. So if you're someone who exercises in the evening, then your insulin sensitivity is going to be higher then anyway. And besides all of that, like, it doesn't hugely matter that much outside of people who are already struggling with insulin resistance for some reason. But the main driver of fat loss is not the timing of the food, but much more like how much you're eating versus how much you're expending, and if you're in a calorie deficit. So that was that one. I don't know if there was anything else I can say on that. Oh, another claim, standard. This is like, you'll see this all the time, but claim that it had boosted metabolism. If you see this, it's normally like marketing bullshit. And that's because your metabolic rate is primarily influenced by your total body mass, how much mass you are maintaining, your activity levels, and then to a smaller extent, like hormones, maybe illness, very, very slightly the amount of food and the type of food that you're eating. So some types of food has a higher thermic effect, like eating more protein. That has quite a minimal effect. The meal timing is not a metabolism booster at all. And also, inflammation is just thrown around everywhere at the moment as a bit of a buzzword. You certainly can't just say that you're reducing someone's inflammation if you're not actually measuring inflammation markers in the blood. Okay, so that's that one. Let me just check where I am on the live. Oh, I don't have it up here. Oh, here I am. Well, please. I have another thing to debunk here. Okay. So the other thing to talk about is like the pushback I got this week about talking about small women. And I got quite a lot of comments from people. Initially, the comments I was like, yeah, this is actually a completely fair question. So basically, a friend of mine came to me. I know off the top of my head, I can't remember her exact weight. I think she's 52 kilograms, maybe 54 kilograms. But basically, she is actually technically in a healthy BMI range, on the higher end of the healthy BMI range. But she feels a lot better, grams lighter. Still within, right? And having looked at her, so I'm like, yeah, you've got excess fat that you could lose without you getting too lean. And if you feel there and you perform better there, like your body, great, this is your goal. I'm more than happy to help you get here. But the kickback I got was like, why are you forcing this person to diet when they're already in a healthy BMI range? And there's a couple of things I want to make here. Number one, I'm not forcing anyone to do anything with people literally come to me asking for my help. I'm certainly not going out there looking for people. Um, Secondly, when you're a small person, even 2 kilograms can feel like a lot and can actually look like quite a lot as well. And I think that's quite hard to get your head around if you're not small. So this client is 5 foot tall. 2 kilograms actually does look quite different, and even, like, the way that clothes and stuff can be quite different. Now, if you're, like, 5'11", 2 kilograms, you might not even notice, you might look exactly the same, it really might not show up very much. But when you have a smaller frame, it does show up a lot. So that would be my second point. And then one woman had commented saying that, "Why do we let women gaslight themselves like this?" And like I said, one, I'm not forcing this woman to be in a deficit. She's come to me with a goal, and she feels better when she is a few kilograms lighter, still within that healthy BMI range, and from pictures, she has excess fat that she can lose and still stay healthy. Even a little bit of weight on a small frame can look very different. And then thirdly, I would argue that it's gaslighting generally to tell women how their body should look. So even if you're saying, like, you should be happy, you're not allowed to lose weight because you're in a healthy BMI range. Like, she's allowed to be like, "This is where I look and feel my best. Piss off, random Facebook lady," you know? You're allowed to have your own goals. And then I also just hate the term gaslight being used in, like, every I don't know, when, when it's, not relevant. So, then I had a lot of women replying, smaller women kind of just being like, "Yeah, I completely get this, I feel the same." Um, and also the interesting discussion with someone, and this is another great point, that unfortunately there are some genetic traits that mean that, for example, South Asian women, need to have a slightly lower body fat level in order to be healthy, right? So they have higher risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and general metabolic health complications at lower body fat level. And that's partly to do with where they store their body fat, so much more likely to store it centrally, so around you get the most, metabolic complications from storing body fat, which means that you do need to be even leaner. So, as much as I talk quite a lot, and I will always say, "She's obsessed with small women," which is true. I think it's a underrepresented area, and I just think it is genuinely significantly harder, especially when you look at portion sizes, et cetera, Like, it's very hard to live in the environment that we live in and stay lean as a woman, full stop, but as a small woman, even more. Then add to that, like, as a South Asian small woman who needs to stay at an even lower BMI range in order to be healthy, it becomes very hard to do. And I would say especially in the winter when generally most people are moving less and then their expenditure's going down as well. So it's a hard thing to do, it's important to talk about, and actually a lot of the advice that is given to people on higher calories is just really unhelpful and unrealistic, and I think people can feel like they're doing something wrong, especially when you see posts like the post I just spoke about, which is, I've been on Now I've got this person up to 2,000 calories, and actually she's losing weight, which, technically would mean that even at 2,000 calories, that's not her maintenance. If I had my 5 foot tall, weighing 50 kilograms, who's just about able to get 8,000 steps a day because works an office job, has 2 kids, needs to get home, um, they would be putting on a lot of weight at 2,000 calories, right? And sometimes I know that when you kind of point that out, it's like, yeah, okay, different people need different calorie allowances. But I think when you're bombarded on social media with like, "No, you need to fuel yourself more," and like, "Look how many calories I'm eating," and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, 'cause you're taller than me, you have so much more body mass to maintain that your basal metabolic rate resting needs are so much higher than mine, and you're active, and most of these people are doing, like, high rocks classes every day and huge amounts of steps and have active jobs and things. It's just not realistic. So you need to kind of ignore all of that noise and focus on actually what works for you. And if you do want some help with that, and if you want some coaching support that is no bullshit and we're not gonna sell you problems that you don't have, we're gonna actually explain the solution best for you, apply it to you, then join the next commit series. You can message me commit on Instagram if you wanna have a chat with me about it, ESG Fitness, or you can head over to esgfitness.co.uk/commit and find out everything that you need to know. Like I said, this intake, you will also get the 6-week mindset course with it. I wrote that in the depths of heartbreak, and I have to say it's some of my best work ever. Uh, and it will definitely help you out of your own way, take action, get your head in the right space to actually change long term as well. So you can be working through that, and you will also have the energy first formula, which works unbelievably well. All right, I'm gonna wrap up for tonight. Thank you for coming, and if you do have, um oh, the audio's not great. Sorry about that. If you do have any questions about anything, then, fire away and I'll make sure I cover them next week. All right, bye.